So in part 2 we modeled the mesh with the illusion that it was being tied at the back. So now in this part 3 we're going to model the cloth that's been knotted and tied at the back. To begin, I'll just place the cursor at the bottom area of the mesh gap here, and then I'll just add a circle, come into the toolbar and change the vertices from 32 to 8. And then in edit mode I'll just scale down and place the circle kind of diagonally in an area that will begin making the first part of our knot. So I'm just going to extrude the mesh, and then by pressing R twice I can rotate the circle almost in a mirrored fashion diagonally, so that the area facing us, the back of the mask, is very wide, and the part inside the mask is very thin. And from that point I've just added a loop cut, and I'll begin tucking the bottom area of the mesh underneath, and also some of the back area. It'll make sense in a little while what I'm aiming for here. But I'll just show you my reference. Basically I've taken my scarf, since it's winter time here currently, and I've just tied it in a knot, and I'm basically going by that shape and seeing areas where there's almost a cloth wrinkle that doubles underneath itself. And this tucking in and scrunching, sort of twisting of the cloth is what I'm trying to achieve here using this torus-like shape. So I've added a subsurf modifier, and I'm just tucking in and pushing out different areas of this outside loop. And when I'm pretty happy with the shape, I'm just going in and adding another loop for some more definition. Putting some vertices closer to each other and tucking one behind the other helps define the shape and the sharpness of any edge. And basically, the closer together the vertices are and the sharper the edge, it's assumed the thinner the material is, or at least that the material is being pulled much tighter. So I want to give this look of a point where the cloth that folds underneath meets at a point and the rest becomes quite smooth, rather than that tucked in area going all the way around the back, just to match the way that my scarf looked. So I've added a horizontal loop cut, and I'm just aiming to get the mesh very smooth from the crease point where the cloth fold kind of meets at a point and ends. And to the left here I've just made an extrusion inward a bit to add a bit of a bevel, again as if the cloth is tucking in, and just using proportional editing to push some of the cloth out a bit more and avoid any really noticeable intersections. So that's part 1 of our knot done. So I'm just going to put the 3D cursor back at the center of that first mesh and add another circle with 8 vertices. And basically the idea that I'm going to go here with my knot is really like a slightly more complex version of 2 toruses that are chained together, almost like a chain link feel. So you can see I'm placing this circle now diagonally the other way, and then extruding out, scaling in a bit to squish the mesh, and just placing the mesh around again. And the gap at the bottom right there, and also the bottom left that you saw earlier that I beveled, that will be the 2 gaps that the remaining cloth that was tied together will flow out of and just hang. So you'll see that a little bit later. So now I've just done a very small loop derail there. Just again to show a bit more of the cloth twisting around and causing these cloth folds that are a little bit less linear. And there I'm just placing the cloth to come up and over the other mesh. Just trying to keep the gaps to a minimum since it's a knot. You really want to avoid any loose looking areas. So again, I've just extruded and added a cut and pushed out the mesh to make it a little bit more rounded, since the cloth I imagine here is a little bit thicker. I'm just making the edges a little bit more rounded so that it doesn't look too thin, and give the illusion that there's really a lot of mass inside that knot. Again, just adding some more loop cuts and then switching between one being scaled out a bit and one being scaled in a bit to give this up and down surface. And then just going into the W key specials menu and smoothing where necessary. And there's our complete knot. So I'll just play around with the scale and height of it. You can see that the bottom of the mast there seems to still be quite visible, and it doesn't really look natural, as I want to appear as though the cloth is being pulled in. So I'll work on that now. Basically, I'm just going to use proportional editing. Take the middle vertices and just push them up towards the knot. And the remaining cloth that will come out of those gaps should help hide the rest of the intersections and such. So I've just added a plane now, and that will begin our loose cloth that just kind of hangs out. Again, just similar to the scarf reference. And one of the main ideas I'm going with here is that the cloth sort of twists around as gravity pulls it from the top. And basically I've just grabbed each horizontal edge and just rotated it. Now I really need to fill up this gap area here, so once again I'm going to go with the idea that it's the cloth is really scrunched up. So I'm mixing between pulling some of the cloth out and pulling some of it in, and I'm also getting the edges to loop around the outside of the gap there to make sure that it doesn't show too much of the hollow inside. And the hope there is that will give the illusion of quite a bit of cloth being all squished together inside this knot. It's already starting to look effective. And now I'm just going to pay some more attention to the bottom area of the cloth as well and make that a little bit more natural. If you notice cloth, when it hangs, it's never completely flat because of the different areas being pulled and that are hanging. Usually get this up and down effect. So you can see as the cloth at the bottom there juts out, I have it drop down a little bit lower, and that gives a bit more of just a natural cloth-like look. So at this point I'm pretty happy. I'm just going to extrude out the cloth a little bit. And then so it doesn't look too rounded and soft, I'm just going to make another edge cut along the outside loop of faces. And then again, just Alt S a little bit outward. I've just selected the tie and then the knot second with Shift. And then by hitting Control L and selecting material, I can make the hanging cloth material the same as the knot and the rest of the mask. Now to create the final hanging cloth, I'm just going to place the 3D cursor near that left gap and add another plane. Scale it down and position it diagonally. And then I'll just begin extruding out once more, scaling the vertices as I go and adding loop cuts if I need to. Once again, just twisting by rotating and then pressing the Z key to rotate only on the Z axis. Now I'm just going to come in and add a subdivision surface modifier on that one as well. And again, just begin outlining around the outside of the gap. To give that appearance of the cloth getting scrunched up as it gets closer to the area of the knot. Just to change things up a bit, I'm making this one a little bit shorter, as that usually happens with a knot. One loose part that you've pulled, sometimes a bit shorter than the other. And just adding its own set of loops and cloth folds, rather than just duplicating, just to give it a bit more of a natural look. I can also go in and out of local view mode with numpad /, just as I did with the eyeball in the face chapter, if I need to have a bit more of a look at what's going on with the vertices in and around the knot area. So you can see there I've just merged some of the vertices together at the point where there's just too many getting clogged. And this usually happens from just adding too many loop cuts to adjust the vertices up higher on the mesh. So basically my main aim now is just getting the vertices sorted. I'm trying to have the look of it folding over itself and whatnot. So the real trick there is to try and not get lost in the complexity of the vertices, and try and keep an eye on where intersections are happening and how I can avoid them. So you can see there I selected some of the bottom vertices and clicked H to hide them, and that was able to give me a much better indication of where the vertices were before subdivision surface. So now I'm pretty happy again with everything except the bottom area here. Being so straight, it doesn't look very natural at all, so I'm just going to, once again, pull a couple of the vertices in a zigzag kind of motion and just change the height. Finally, I'll just play around with some of the rotation of the cloth. And then I've just extruded all of the vertices and added another loop cut around the entire edge of the cloth. And just scaled that out a little bit again with Alt S. I've also just selected the tie I just made, and second shift selected one of the meshes with the grey material, and then once again Control L and link to material, so that now shares the same material. It's looking quite good now. Finally, I figure I might just come in and make some small tweaks just before I move on. This is something to really get in a good habit of doing before you're about to move on from anything. Just at each step, show anyone in the Blender community. You can go onto the community forums, or just show anyone that you know, any of your friends. Anything that they might notice that looks a little bit weird, you can go in and fix before moving on to something else. And on that note, the cloth ties are done, so let's move on to the hair.